Have you ever wondered why the most intelligent people, those who see through illusions, who speak with clarity, who understand how the world truly works, so often end up isolated? It doesn't make sense at first. We're told that intelligence is a gift that, if you're smart enough, clear enough, rational enough, you'll rise. You'll be respected. You'll be heard. But that's not what happens, is it? Look back on your own life. Think about the conversations where you said something honest, brutally honest, and watch the temperature in the room drop. Think about the moments where your clarity didn't inspire admiration, but discomfort. Think about how many times you corrected a lie, exposed a contradiction, or pointed out what everyone else was afraid to see. And instead of respect, you were met with cold stares, subtle exclusion, or outright hostility. The truth intelligence, when unfiltered, humiliates. It slices through illusion like a knife, and most people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for emotional safety. They want validation, not confrontation. And so the more you speak truth, the more isolated you become. The more clearly you see, the more of a threat you are. Not because you intend to harm, but because your very presence becomes unbearable to fragile egos. This is not just your experience. It's a pattern, a law of human behavior. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it clearly over a century ago, and what he revealed is more relevant now than ever. Because in a world that rewards comfort over clarity and sameness over strength, your intelligence isn't enough. It's not your sharpness that will determine your future, but your strategy. And if you want to survive and win in a mediocre world, then the first thing you must learn is this: you don't reveal power, you hide it. They told you intelligence would be your greatest asset. That if you just thought clearly, spoke truthfully, and sharpened your mind, the world would make room for you. You were promised that being intelligent would open doors, that clarity, logic, and insight would earn you respect, admiration, and opportunity. But as you got older, you began to notice something unsettling, something no one warned you about. The smarter you became, the lonelier you felt. The more aware you grew, the more isolated you became. And suddenly, intelligence didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a weight. You start to realize that what you once believed would elevate you now alienates you. Your clarity makes others uncomfortable. Your honesty offends. You walk into a room and sense the tension when you speak with too much certainty, when your words cut too deep even if they're true. You're not trying to hurt anyone, but your presence becomes a mirror. And people don't like what they see when they're forced to face it. What most people want isn't truth, they want comfort. They want the illusion that everything is fine, that their beliefs are sound, that their worldview is secure. And when you, with your insight, your critical eye, your refusal to accept falsehoods, show up and break that illusion, you're not thanked, you're punished. They won't always say it out loud, but they'll withdraw. They'll resist. They'll resent you. Because in their eyes, your intelligence isn't neutral, it's a threat. This is the hidden curse of being intelligent in a mediocre world. Your mind works, but the environment around you resists it. You see clearly, but clarity is dangerous in a society addicted to comfort. You speak directly, but directness is mistaken for arrogance. You're not loud, but your presence alone disturbs people who are used to shadows. So eventually you start to feel like there's something wrong with you. You ask yourself, why can't I connect? Why does everyone else seem to get along while I sit here silent, watching, sensing everything they pretend not to see? And this is where the pain begins. Because it's not just isolation, it's misinterpretation. People don't just ignore you, they misunderstand you. You're labeled as cold, distant, condescending, intimidating. But they don't see the restraint behind your silence. They don't see the thousands of thoughts you hold back, the truths you could unleash, but choose not to. They don't see that you're not trying to dominate, you're trying to survive. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this. He saw that intelligence, when not managed carefully, creates distance. That people don't resent stupidity, they resent superiority. Not because they hate brilliance itself, but because it reminds them of what they're not. Because truth, when uninvited, wounds pride. Because clarity in the wrong context becomes confrontation. And so you find yourself at a crossroads. You can keep shining your light, speaking your truth, correcting mistakes, and losing everyone. Or you can learn something more powerful: how to wield intelligence as a weapon, not a spotlight. How to stop making people feel small just by existing. How to play the long game, the silent game. Because in a mediocre world, those who survive aren't always the smartest, but those who are smart enough to know when to speak and when to disappear. And this isn't about giving up your brilliance. It's about protecting it. It's about understanding that intelligence like fire must be contained or it burns everything in its path, including you. It's about realizing that your value isn't diminished by silence. In fact, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all and let others reveal themselves. Because the truth is, you were never broken. The world is just not built for people like you. But that doesn't mean you can't win. It just means you need a new strategy. You might think that speaking the truth earns respect, that correcting mistakes helps others grow, that clarity when offered with good intentions would be appreciated. But reality doesn't work that way. In fact, the harsh truth is this: intelligence, when expressed without restraint, does not inspire admiration, it awakens resistance. And the more raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic your brilliance is, the more dangerous you become in the eyes of others. Because what seems like logic to you feels like judgment to them. What feels like obvious insight to you cuts like a blade through their self-image. You think you're helping by offering truth, but in their world, truth is confrontation. And confrontation feels like humiliation. People don't want to be corrected. They want to be seen affirmed and safe. So when you point out a flaw in someone's argument or reveal an inconsistency in their thinking, what you're really doing in their eyes is exposing their weakness. You're pulling off the mask they worked so hard to wear. And that doesn't make you a hero. It makes you the enemy. How many times have you said something you thought was obvious only to be met with coldness, distance, or subtle hostility? How often have you corrected someone politely, even gently, only to find yourself on the receiving end of passive-aggressive comments or social exclusion? And how many times have you walked away from a conversation wondering, what did I do wrong? The answer is often nothing except that you made someone feel inferior without meaning to. This is the paradox of uncontrolled intelligence. It doesn't need to be loud to be threatening. It doesn't even need to be intentional. Sometimes just your presence, the calm precision in your speech, the way you think through layers others ignore, is enough to trigger people's insecurities. Because intelligence, when not tempered with awareness, becomes a mirror. And most people are not ready to see themselves clearly. Arthur Schopenhauer recognized this tension. He wrote that intelligence can backfire when used without wisdom, that brilliance without subtlety alienates more than it enlightens, that a man who always speaks his mind, no matter how accurate, walks into battle every time he opens his mouth and loses more allies than he gains. Why? Because the ego is fragile, and the more intelligent you are, the more capable you are of shattering it sometimes without even trying. So what starts as a conversation turns into a contest. What begins as clarity turns into confrontation. You don't intend to dominate, but others feel dominated. You don't seek to shame, but they feel exposed. And when that happens, logic no longer matters. Only pride does. And pride always strikes back. So what do? You learn restraint. You learn to hold the blade of your mind behind your back, not because you're weak, but because you're strategic. You realize that winning an argument doesn't mean anything if you lose influence. That correcting someone doesn't help if it only builds resentment. And that real intelligence isn't about showing how much you know, it's about knowing when not to show it at all. If your goal is respect, don't boast. If your goal is influence, don't correct. If your goal is control, don't intimidate with intellect. Instead, let others feel like they found the answer. Let them believe they were right all along. Let them feel smart in your presence, and you'll become indispensable to them. Because in the end, intelligence is not just a gift, it's a tool. And if you use it without precision, it cuts both ways. It wounds others and it isolates you. But if you master it, if you learn to guide rather than expose, then your intelligence becomes something greater than knowledge. It becomes power, silent, invisible, and undeniable. There comes a point when you realize that being right isn't enough. That truth, no matter how pure or logical, isn't always welcome. That intelligence, if revealed too openly, can become a target on your back. And so if you want to survive, not just survive, but move strategically through a world that rewards conformity and punishes clarity, you must embrace one of the most uncomfortable but effective truths of all. Sometimes the smartest move is to pretend you're not smart at all. This is not weakness. This is not cowardice. This is art. The art of restraint. The art of psychological camouflage. The art of choosing not to be seen until the moment is right. Arthur Schopenhauer called it the art of pretending to be a fool. Not because you are a fool, but because there are moments when disguising your brilliance is the highest form of wisdom. When you understand this, something profound shifts inside you. You stop trying to be understood. You stop trying to prove your value. You stop placing your intelligence on display like a trophy and instead begin wielding it like a hidden dagger, drawn only when necessary, never before. Why? Because most people cannot handle real intelligence. Not emotionally, not psychologically. It unsettles them. It reminds them of their limitations. It forces them to question beliefs they've built their identity around. So if you walk into every room eager to speak truth, eager to correct, eager to be seen as the smart one, you will lose more than you win. Not because you're wrong, but because you don't yet understand the game you're playing. And make no mistake, life is a game. A social one, a psychological one. And in that game, those who succeed are not always the most intelligent, but those who are intelligent enough to play dumb when it benefits them. The ones who know that perception is power, and that power increases when it's hidden, not broadcasted. Pretending to be a fool is not about self-betrayal. It's about strategic positioning. It's about allowing others to feel smarter, more dominant, more in control, because you know that control is an illusion. And the moment they lower their guard, thinking they've figured you out, thinking they're the ones in power, that's when the real game begins. You don't win by outshining everyone. You win by being underestimated. Because when people underestimate you, they expose themselves. They show you who they are without masks. They reveal their weaknesses, their arrogance, their impatience. And while they're busy performing for validation, you're studying learning positioning. You become the silent architect behind the illusion guiding outcomes without ever being perceived as a threat. This is the game of kings, generals, philosophers. Napoleon understood it. So did Da Vinci. So did Tesla. The greatest minds in history rarely revealed the full extent of their brilliance. They played within perception. They controlled narratives. They let others take the spotlight while they shaped the structure of the room. That's not submission, that's supremacy in its highest form. And here's the paradox: the more you appear to know, the more resistance you invite. But the more you pretend not to know, the more influence you gain. Because people don't resist what they don't perceive as dangerous. And in a world ruled by ego, safety often matters more than truth. So hold back, watch, wait, smile when they mock you, nod when they underestimate you, and understand that the greatest power isn't in being seen, it's in being dismissed until it's too late. This is how you move in silence. This is how you win without ever entering the battlefield. Not by proving how smart you are, but by making others believe they're in control while you're the one quietly shaping the outcome. This is not deception. This is survival. This is war. And in this war, the fool who sees everything but says nothing always has the advantage. There's a painful truth most people never admit, not because they don't see it, but because it's too unsettling to face. And it's this: the world is not built for the brilliant. It's built to protect the mediocre. In theory, we celebrate intelligence, talent, vision. But in practice, society rewards comfort, conformity, and predictability. And anyone who steps outside that, anyone who dares to be too sharp, too aware, too different, becomes a problem. If you've ever felt like your intelligence creates more friction than favor, it's not your imagination. It's the structure of the system. Look around. Notice who gets promoted, who gets invited in, who rises in groups. It's rarely the most brilliant. It's the most agreeable, the safest, the ones who fit in just enough to not provoke discomfort, the ones who know how to play dumb, stay in line, and keep others feeling good, even if it means suppressing the truth. Because in a mediocre world, truth is dangerous. Brilliance is threatening. And anyone who reflects too much clarity, too much depth, becomes a mirror people don't want to look into. Mediocrity isn't just tolerated, it's armored. It's reinforced. Groups of mediocre people band together, form alliances, and create barriers to keep out those who shine too brightly. Not because they're evil, but because they're fragile. And fragility always fears what exposes it. You've seen it before. In school, the smartest kids weren't the most popular. In meetings, the sharpest insights were often ignored or borrowed by someone more socially accepted. In conversations, the person who challenged the norm became difficult, while the one who nodded along was rewarded. It's not an accident, it's a design. The world bends toward what makes people feel safe, not what pushes them to grow. So where does that leave the brilliant, often isolated? Misunderstood? Silenced? Unless they learn how to adapt, not by dumbing themselves down, but by understanding the psychology of the environment they're in. Because here's the hard truth: being right doesn't mean you'll be embraced. Being wise doesn't mean you'll be trusted. And being different doesn't mean you'll be celebrated. In fact, those qualities often make you a target. That's why the truly intelligent don't waste energy trying to fit in. But they also don't wage war against mediocrity. Instead, they learn to move around it, through it, beyond it. They become observers, strategists. They speak in ways that disarm. They choose silence when it serves them. They learn to influence without threatening and to guide without exposing themselves as the source. This isn't surrender, it's strategy. Because the goal is not to destroy mediocrity, it's to avoid being destroyed by it. If you go head-to-head with a mediocre system, you will lose not because you lack strength, but because you underestimated its need to protect itself. So stop expecting the world to reward your brilliance. It won't. At least not openly. Not until it's too late to stop you. Not until you've moved so far ahead in silence that the game is already won. The goal isn't to be recognized. The goal is to become unstoppable without needing recognition at all. Let others crave applause. Let them chase likes, titles, and validation. You build leverage, build power, build silence. Because in a world that elevates the average, the exceptional must learn to disappear until it's time to strike. There's a moment when a wise man stops asking to be understood and starts learning how to play the game. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Not because he wants to manipulate, but because he understands that raw power, when revealed too early, attracts resistance, not respect. And so he begins to conceal what he once displayed, not because he's diminished, but because he's evolved. If you've ever felt that being brilliant, capable, or visionary made others turn against you, it's not a flaw in you. It's a flaw in the timing of your exposure. You revealed too much too soon in a world that sees brightness as danger. Most people want light, but only the kind they can control. The moment you burn too brightly, you're labeled as arrogant, intimidating, or too much. So you adapt. You learn a deeper skill, the art of restraint. You no longer need to show your full hand in every conversation, every meeting, every room. Instead, you observe. You hold back. You play along. You blend in just enough to move freely, because that's the paradox of power. It's more effective when it's invisible. Power that walks loudly gets challenged. Power that whispers, that smiles, that waits, controls everything without ever being noticed. Think of the great players in history. Napoleon never showed his true strategy until the moment was ripe. Da Vinci encoded his genius in layers. Tesla misunderstood in his time, knew that public understanding wasn't a requirement for influence. What made them powerful wasn't just what they knew, it was how and when they revealed it. Power, when released at the right moment, is unstoppable. But when exposed prematurely, it invites sabotage. Most people burn themselves out trying to prove their value to those who are not ready to see it. They overexplain. They correct others constantly. They feel compelled to be acknowledged. But real power isn't desperate. It's quiet, patient, surgical. It lets others speak first. It lets others feel safe. And then when the moment is right, it makes a single move that shifts everything. Imagine you're in a room and someone says something foolish. Your instinct might be to correct them, to assert the truth, to protect logic. But ask yourself, what do I gain by revealing what I know right now? Will I gain influence or just trigger ego? Because if it's ego you activate, you've already lost. Even if you're right. That's the cost of unnecessary exposure. The smarter play is silence. Let the moment pass. Let others reveal their hand. Because while they waste energy posturing, you're learning how the table is set, and when the time comes, you'll move once with precision and win what they were too loud to see coming. You don't need to correct every error. You don't need to speak every truth. The wisest warriors don't swing their sword at every insult, they wait for the strike that matters. And in doing so, they conserve their energy, their leverage, and their mystery. This is the strategy: play small until the moment demands that you rise. Not out of timidity, but out of design. You're not hiding your power, you're preserving it. You're not afraid to speak, you're choosing when your voice will actually move the room. The world doesn't reward those who shout the loudest. It rewards those who choose the perfect moment to speak and say the one thing no one saw coming. We live in a world obsessed with visibility. Everyone wants to be seen, heard, recognized. People compete for attention like it's oxygen, flashing achievements, chasing validation, proving their worth to people who were never really watching in the first place. But there's a truth no one tells you in that race: the more visible you become, the more exposed you are, and the more vulnerable you become to envy, sabotage, and manipulation. That's why those who understand the real rules of power learn something that changes everything they learn: to disappear. Not disappear in the literal sense, but strategically, intellectually, energetically. They stop making themselves targets. They withdraw their need to be praised. They drop the impulse to announce their every move. They become quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're watching. They're calculating. They're becoming untouchable. Strategic invisibility isn't weakness. It's armor. It allows you to move without triggering alarms. It allows you to build without interference. It protects you from those who would weaponize your truth or twist your gifts into reasons to tear you down. Because the reality is this: when people see you as powerful, they either want to use you or stop you. When you're underestimated, they leave you alone. And when they leave you alone, that's when the real game begins. The most dangerous predators in the wild don't roar, they stalk. The most lethal soldiers don't declare their position, they strike from the shadows. The same is true in life. Real power moves silently. Real influence grows in the dark. And by the time the world realizes what you've built, it's too late to stop you. The chessboard is already set. Your position is already secured. There's an elegance to this kind of movement. It's not driven by ego, it's driven by outcome. You don't need credit. You don't need noise. You don't need to dominate the room to own it. You simply need to know exactly when to move and when to hold still. This is where your intelligence becomes dangerous in the best possible way. Because instead of trying to prove yourself, you're learning how to position yourself. And that difference, that restraint, makes you unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. You become unreadable. People don't know what you're thinking, so they can't prepare for what you'll do. They don't see you coming, so they don't defend against you. And when the moment comes to act, to speak, to lead, to execute, you do so with such precision, such clarity that no one can stop you. Not because you forced your way forward, but because you waited. You prepared. You moved when the timing was yours, not theirs. That is the power of strategic invisibility. It is the ability to exist outside the radar of mediocrity, to rise without announcing, to strike without warning. It gives you freedom because you're not bound by other people's expectations or envy. It gives you clarity because you're not distracted by needing approval. And most of all, it gives you control because you're no longer reacting. You're orchestrating. Let others exhaust themselves in the spotlight. Let them fight for recognition and crumble under its weight. You build in silence. You prepare in silence. And when the time is right, you arrive fully formed, undeniable, unstoppable. In a world addicted to noise, your silence becomes the most powerful thing in the room. One of the greatest illusions in human behavior is this: that people treat you based on who you really are. They don't. They treat you based on how they perceive you, and perception is rarely accurate. It's emotional, reactive, filtered through ego and fear. This is why your power, your intellect, even your potential can become liabilities if they make you appear threatening to others. People don't attack what they understand. They attack what makes them feel small. And in a world full of fragile egos, the simple act of being powerful can make you a target. So if you want to move freely without drawing fire, without awakening unnecessary resistance, you must master the subtle art of appearing harmless. That doesn't mean being weak. It means being underestimated. It means choosing to look smaller than you are so that others lower their guard. It means knowing that visibility brings judgment while harmlessness brings freedom. The more dangerous you truly are, the more crucial it becomes to hide that danger, not suppress it, not erase it, but cover it with a smile, a quiet nod, a soft demeanor that lets others feel safe in your presence. Because the moment someone perceives you as competition, as a threat, as someone who might steal the attention or the position they crave, their subconscious will begin to sabotage you. And they won't even realize they're doing it. They'll rationalize it as not vibing with you or just feeling off about you, but deep down they're reacting to your unspoken power. They're reacting to what you don't even say, but what your presence reveals. So instead of triggering their defenses, you disarm them. You let them believe you're just another face in the room. You nod more than you speak. You observe more than you share. You ask questions instead of offering answers. And over time, they forget to fear you. They forget to watch you. They stop preparing for you because they never expected you to rise. And that's when you strike. Not out of malice, not out of revenge, but out of pure precision. Because while they were scrambling for attention, you were preparing for the opportunity that really mattered. While they exhausted themselves chasing recognition, you built something in the dark. And when the spotlight finally turns, when the position opens, when the decision must be made, when the real power is up for grabs, you're already standing where no one thought to look. This is the hidden advantage of appearing harmless. You are free to move, while others are busy defending themselves from ghosts. You become the quiet one they ignore until they can't. And by the time they notice your presence, it's too late. You've outmaneuvered them without a word. You've gained ground without confrontation. You've advanced while they stayed still, frozen in their need to be seen. Let them compete. Let them show off. Let them chase applause. You're building silence into strategy. You're using humility as camouflage. You're turning invisibility into momentum. And when the time comes to reveal who you really are, not the harmless version, but the sharp, strategic, unstoppable force beneath it, there will be no resistance left. No defense prepared, just stunned silence. Because they never saw you coming. That's the point. When you appear harmless, the world relaxes. And when the world relaxes, you're free to take whatever it was too distracted to protect. In a world obsessed with being seen, praised, and validated, there's a rare kind of power in restraint. A strength that doesn't shout, doesn't rush, doesn't need the spotlight to confirm its existence. That power is precision. The kind of precision that waits, watches, and moves only when the time is right, not a second too early, not a breath too late. Because here's the truth, few people ever realize visibility is not the same as impact. Being everywhere, saying everything, reacting to every moment, that doesn't make you powerful. It makes you predictable. And the more predictable you are, the easier you are to control, to manipulate, to block. But when you move with surgical intent, when every word, every silence, every step is chosen with care, you become something else entirely. You become unreadable, unstoppable, and unforgettable. You've seen what happens when people burn too fast. They start strong, loud, they crave attention, they dominate conversations. But it's unsustainable. They reveal too much too soon. And eventually the room adapts. People start to push back. Their weaknesses are exposed. Their energy is spent defending a presence they didn't know how to pace. Precision is different. Precision doesn't waste effort. It doesn't speak unless it changes the outcome. It doesn't act unless the move is unavoidable and final. When you learn to operate with this kind of control, you stop trying to win every battle. You start choosing which battles actually matter. Think of the sniper, not the soldier charging the front lines. The sniper studies, waits, breathes with purpose. His shot is not louder, it's cleaner. And it changes everything. One moment, one move, but behind it, hours of silence, discipline, calculation. That's what makes it lethal. That's what makes it mastery. You want to be respected. Don't interrupt people. Don't fight for every inch of the conversation. Let them talk. Let them believe they're in control. While they reveal themselves, you prepare. While they waste energy being loud, you conserve your strength. Because when the moment finally comes and you choose to speak, the room stops. Not because you forced it, but because your presence has been calibrated for that exact moment. The problem with constant exposure is that it forces you to defend every angle of yourself. But when you're selective, when you show only what must be seen and nothing more, you retain the most valuable thing in any power dynamic: mystery. And mystery breeds influence. People don't resist what they don't understand. They don't attack what they can't read. They become careful around you not because you threaten them, but because your precision made them second-guess their own certainty. That's the power of being precise. You don't need to dominate the space. You just need to wait until the space is yours. And it will be not because you demanded it, but because you designed the moment so well it had no choice but to open. So don't rush. Don't explain everything. Don't try to prove your worth with volume. Learn to play the long game. Measure people. Study their rhythms. Detect their insecurities. And when you make your move, make it once and make it irreversible. Because in the end, no one remembers who talked the most. They remember who spoke at the right time, in the right way, and changed everything with a single sentence. Be that person. Choose precision over visibility every time. People don't treat you based on your truth. They treat you based on their perception of your truth. And that subtle difference is everything. You could be wise, capable, and deeply intelligent. But if the world sees you as a threat, it will push you out. If it sees you as a pawn, it will use you. If it sees you as irrelevant, it will ignore you. And none of that has anything to do with who you really are, only with what you project. That's why learning to control perception is not manipulation, it's survival. You see, most people walk through life under the illusion that others will recognize their value simply because it exists. They think that being good or smart or competent will naturally lead to acknowledgement. But it doesn't. This world does not operate on objective truths, it operates on social optics. Appear strong and they will test you. Appear weak and they will step over you. Appear harmless and they will overlook you. But appear just right, exactly what the moment demands, and you gain influence without even asking for it. That's the secret. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be perceived as useful, agreeable, or strategically positioned. You don't need to be powerful all the time. You need to look non-threatening when it's time to blend in and dangerous when it's time to strike. Because perception is a shape-shifting game. And the moment you forget that, the moment you assume your inner truth is enough, you lose control of how the world interacts with you. This isn't about being fake. It's about being tactically authentic, knowing which parts of yourself to reveal and when. It's about self-possession, not self-denial. Because here's the hard reality. Every human interaction, no matter how casual it seems, is an exchange of power. Every conversation carries an invisible current. Who's leading, who's reacting, who's influencing whom. And if you're unaware of that current, if you walk into rooms without managing how you're perceived, you are already being pulled by someone else's narrative. Think about it. Some people have the uncanny ability to make others agree with them without ever raising their voice. They're not pushy, they're not loud, but somehow the room bends around them. People want to follow them, trust them, be around them. That's not charisma. That's not magic. That's calibrated perception control. They've mastered the energy they project, and they use it with intent. Do you want to command a room? Start by asking yourself, how am I being perceived right now? Not how you feel, but how you're being interpreted. Because if someone sees you as arrogant, even if you're just confident, it doesn't matter. If someone sees you as passive, even if you're just observant, it doesn't matter. Perception is reality in the minds of others. And if you don't manage that, you're giving away your power before you even speak. So learn to mirror. Learn to adapt. Learn to lead without forcing. Adjust your tone, your presence, your posture, not to be fake, but to be effective. Because when you control how others perceive you, you control the lens through which your value is filtered. And once you have that, everything else falls into place. Trust, influence, opportunity, leverage. The most powerful people in the world aren't always the ones with the most to say. They're the ones who shape the story others tell themselves about them. Don't just be great. Be perceived the right way by the right people at the right time. That's real power. Most people think power comes from force, from making demands, from speaking louder, from proving they're right. But real power doesn't move like that. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't argue. It doesn't push. Real power whispers. It nudges. It lets others walk straight into your design, thinking they arrived there on their own. That's not manipulation, it's mastery. And it's the difference between temporary authority and long-term influence. If you still think you have to win arguments to win control, you haven't learned the deeper game. Because influence isn't about overpowering someone's mind, It's about guiding it. It's not about saying, do this because I said so. It's about letting them think it was their idea from the beginning. And when they believe the choice was theirs, there's no resistance, no defensiveness, no pushback. Have you noticed how people become stubborn the moment you try to convince them of something directly? Even if your idea is logical, even if it benefits them, they resist. Why? Because direct persuasion activates the ego. It triggers a defense mechanism that says you're trying to control me. You're trying to make me feel inferior. You think you're smarter than me. And when that switch flips, reason no longer matters. All that's left is pride. But if you learn the art of indirect suggestion, everything changes. Instead of giving answers, you ask questions. Instead of stating truths, you drop hints. You plant ideas like seeds carefully, quietly, and you let them take root inside someone else's mind. And then when the time is right, that person believes they arrived at the conclusion themselves. Not because they were told, but because they figured it out. That's the secret weapon of the wise. The strong lead through suggestion. They don't force outcomes. They frame them. They don't make demands. They present options, and each option quietly leads where they want the conversation to go. Every word is chosen. Every pause is intentional. Every question is a doorway. Do you know who's truly dangerous? Not the one who always wins debates, but the one who never has to debate at all. The one who makes you agree with them without even realizing you've been persuaded. That's not manipulation in the toxic sense, that's psychological elegance. That's influence without friction. It's what allows you to operate in rooms where others are burning bridges while you're building unseen highways. And here's the most fascinating part: when people think the idea is theirs, they will defend it, protect it, promote it, without ever knowing it was planted by you. This is how movements are built. This is how loyalties are shaped. This is how cultures are shifted, not through brute force, but through invisible guidance. So practice restraint. Don't always speak first. Don't correct every misstep. Instead, learn to listen for the entry point the moment someone's ego is quiet enough to hear something new. That's when you offer a subtle question, a story, a reflection, something that bypasses their armor and enters through curiosity rather than confrontation. This level of influence requires patience, precision, self-control. But once you master it, you no longer need to chase validation. You no longer need to win loud battles. You become the one who shapes outcomes without anyone realizing your fingerprints are on them. And that is the highest form of power. Because true influence is invisible. If someone knows you're controlling them, you've already failed. But if they walk away believing it was all their idea, their choice, their insight, and yet it aligns perfectly with what you intended, then you've moved like a ghost, a shadow, a master. Don't aim to be convincing. Aim to be inevitable. There's a level of strength beyond confidence, beyond knowledge, beyond influence. It's not about being praised. It's not about being feared. It's not even about being in control. It's about being untouchable, not physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's about becoming so complete within yourself that nothing can shake you, provoke you, or pull you out of your center. This is not just strength, this is sovereignty. To become unreachable is to understand that the highest form of power is not being affected, not reacting to every insult, not chasing every opportunity, not fighting every battle. You're no longer playing the surface-level games. You've left the arena where people scream to be seen. You've stepped into the place where your silence says more than their noise ever could. Because if the world can touch you, it can manipulate you. If people can provoke a reaction, they own a piece of your energy. If they can shame you into explaining yourself, into defending your name, into proving your worth, then you're still on the leash. You're still dancing for their approval. And that's not power. That's bondage dressed as performance. But the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you realize you don't need to convince anyone, you become untouchable. You move differently. You speak less. You watch more. You respond not out of urgency, but out of choice. Your stillness becomes intimidating, not because you're trying to be feared, but because people can no longer predict you, read you, or shake you. Unreachable doesn't mean cold. It doesn't mean disconnected. It means anchored. It means knowing who you are so deeply that no one else's version of you can replace it. It means you've mastered your emotions, not suppressed them. You feel everything, but you decide what deserves a response. You carry fire, but you don't throw it at every passerby. And in that space, you become rare. Because this world is full of emotionally exposed people. People who react to every comment, who chase every insult, who need to be right, seen, validated. They're loud, but they're fragile. They look powerful, but they're puppets to every opinion that touches them. You disappear from that cycle. You no longer explain your silence. You no longer engage where the outcome doesn't matter. You conserve your power. You watch the world from a higher vantage point. And when the time comes to speak, to act, to strike, you do so with a calm that unnerves everyone around you. That's when you know you've ascended into something more. You're not just surviving the system. You've outgrown it. You've stopped playing to win because you've already won the only game that matters, the game of inner mastery. So let the world shout. Let it provoke. Let it demand your attention. You've already seen through it. You no longer need its applause. You've built something no one can touch, a mind that moves in silence, a soul that bends for no one, and a power that needs no stage. That is what it means to be unreachable. And that more than visibility, more than dominance, more than fear, is where true power lives. If there's one truth to carry forward from everything we've explored, it's this. You don't need to be louder. You need to be smarter with your silence. The world doesn't reward those who constantly prove themselves. It rewards those who control perception, move with intent, and preserve their power until the exact moment it matters. You don't owe anyone your full truth. You don't have to win every argument. You don't need to be the most visible person in the room to become the most powerful one in it. Real strength is quiet, it's patient, it's built in solitude, refined through restraint, and unleashed with precision.